Welcome back and thank you for joining us. This PowerPoint presentation and the accompanying narration was created for East Texas Baptist University for use in the course Criminal Justice 4302 Community Policing, and I'm Dr. Eric Hillman. The textbook that we use in this course is Community Policing 8th edition by Miller, Hess, and Orthman. The student's viewing of this presentation is designed to supplement the reading of the textbook and not simply to replace it. Chapter 6 is entitled Communicating with a Diverse Population. I've divided Chapter 6 into several shorter segments for easier online viewing by you, the student. This is Chapter 6E, the final segment of Chapter 6. In the last segment, we talked about some questionable police shootings, and we ended up discussing what are some possible answers. And I was free to admit I don't have all the answers. It's easier to raise questions than to find answers. But one possible answer to accountability for police actions has been the use of police body cameras. Here's a University of Texas police officer. If you notice, on her chest she has a camera covering her buttons. That is intended to record both her actions visibly and her words verbally. Many departments have gone now to use of body cameras. The public has cell phone cameras, and police officers who formerly were not accountable for their actions ever since the advent of the Rodney King era have started to realize there's cameras everywhere, and pretty much everything you say and do you have to assume can be and maybe is being recorded by someone. So if the public wants more police transparency, doesn't it make sense to have officers wear the cameras in order to basically show exactly what they did, but also what actions of the suspect prompted the police response, whether it's something as simple as a restraint or as serious as deadly force. So will police body cameras accomplish that? Well, first of all, police body cameras can prove that the police acted either unlawfully or inappropriately, and certainly that does happen sometimes. And if an officer is actually charged with a civil rights violation, his or her own body camera can be used against him or her in court. On the other hand, these body cameras can also prove that a suspect acted unlawfully. This is a very sad picture. If you go online to look at the video, this guy with the gun is mentally unstable. The officer is very friendly. He approaches this guy and says, "Excuse me, sir, can I talk to you for a minute?" And the guy walks up to the officer, and then at the very last second, he grabs a gun out of his waist area and shoots the officer. This is a still shot taken from the officer's own body camera that was taken approximately 1 second before the officer died. So naturally, this evidence then can be used against the suspect also, in this case, for capital murder of a police officer. The next question then is, should we force the police to have their cameras on all the time? When should the cameras be on? And of course, this picture suggests that there are some times they shouldn't have to be on. Well, here's an officer that had a body camera on, took off his gun belt, I'm not sure what else, and laid it on the floor in the bathroom and didn't realize, apparently, that his camera was recording him going to the bathroom. And of course, the officer's face has been blurred, I guess is the right word. So the bottom line is you can't have cameras activated all the time. There has to be times when they should be able to turn them off. Then the question is when, under what rules, under what guidelines. And if an officer does turn the camera off to go to the bathroom, what if he forgets to turn it back on? Well, officers have a right to privacy. What if he gets a call from his wife and they're talking about personal matters? Shouldn't he be able to turn the camera off so it doesn't record his personal and intimate conversations with his wife? When he's using the bathroom, shouldn't he be able to turn the camera off? So there's got to be some rules established for these type of situations. Some witnesses are willing to talk to the police, but they don't want their statements recorded, and so some witnesses will avoid police if they know the camera is on. Then, assuming the officers do film what they do, who can view that footage? If officers come into your house, either with a search warrant or because they have reason to believe there may be someone in danger there, what if they come into your house thinking the house is on fire, or they heard a scream? Maybe it was just your daughter screaming because she's watching a horror film, but an officer hears a scream, or a neighbor hears a scream and calls the police. The lady next door is screaming. The police come into your house. It ends up being a false alarm, but maybe they get you on camera. Maybe you're in the shower and the officer knocks on the shower door and you come out with just a towel wrapped around you. Should anyone be able to view that? Why not everyone? Because some of this footage is private. Officers go places that the general public can't go. So I don't think that just anyone should be able to watch this footage. If we allow anyone to see it, then that's an invasion of your privacy inside your home. So then you say, okay, only police can watch it. Well, what if it catches a video of a scantily clad woman in your house? Should we then say only female police officers should be able to watch it and not males? What if, or do we have to say only female officers who are not lesbian? You see, we start going down this trail, it's hard to know exactly where to set the limits. You are compelled to obey an officer if he forces his way into your house with or without a warrant. You can't resist arrest. You can fight it in court, but you can't fight it on the scene. What about children? What if the children are scantily clad? If we allow anyone to view it, then really the police department is allowing the viewing of child pornography. What about other innocent people? You can see there's lots of issues here, and it can cause a lot of public embarrassment for you. So let's say we set a policy. Only police officers with a need to know can view the footage. Or if there's no arrests made, the footage has to be erased within a certain number of hours or days. What if there's a pending investigation? What if they come in and there's some evidence of a crime, but the district attorney doesn't know if he wants to file charges? Then should the police be able to hang on to that footage? Probably yes. Well, it's also expensive. The cameras are expensive. The downloading equipment is expensive. There's a huge amount of computer storage issues. You know that when your phone has too many pictures on it, it can get too full. You have to download some of those pictures to your computer or erase them. Well, video is usually MP4 or an equivalent, and it takes up a huge amount of storage. And so now you've got to buy computer storage for all these hundreds and thousands and 10,000s of hours of police footage, video footage. And redaction. If someone wants to watch it, do you have to pay a police officer to watch every video first? For instance, what if someone makes an open records request, whether it's the media or some other concerned citizen? Well, in the open records request, he says, I want all the video footage this year for Officer Hillman. So then the police department has to hire someone, and if I work 40 hours a week and 50 weeks a year, suddenly there's 2,000 hours of video footage. The department can't just release that to the public not knowing what's on it. So now you have to pay someone 2,000 hours of wages to review Officer Hillman's video footage to make sure there's nothing on there that needs to be redacted. And to be redacted means to be erased out of the footage. So if there's questionable times when they catch me going to the bathroom, or they catch a private conversation with my wife, or I go into a house and catch someone who's scantily clad. Well, if a television station or newspaper requests all of Officer Hillman's footage for the year 2019, do they then have to pay someone else 2,000 hours worth of salary to review my footage to see what needs to be redacted? You can see that there are some very expensive issues involved with police body cameras. Well, maybe we should just concentrate on officers who have problems or issues. Well, in some sense, everyone has issues, but police departments have developed early intervention systems, also known as EIS, to identify problem employees. So these are sometimes departments or offices that try to identify problem employees. One of the ways they identify problem employees is by police complaints, internal affairs complaints, absences, excessive sick time, etc. If an officer is involved in a shooting or more than one shooting, what parameters do we put on the EIS to identify or define what a problem officer is? Well, every shooting should be carefully looked at, and usually is by internal affairs. What if one officer is more prone to use force than another? Does that mean that officer is using excessive force? Or in the alternative, does that mean he's been assigned to a higher crime area? And wouldn't you then expect an officer in a higher crime area to have to use force more often than an officer assigned to a quiet suburb, for instance? If there's lots of citizen complaints, does that mean the officer is being rude, is not behaving appropriately? Or does that mean that these citizens are being held accountable to the law and they're upset about it? Department awards might show that an officer is not a problem, or lack of awards. Should that be used as a criteria? The number of arrests made. Is lots of arrests mean he's a hardworking officer? Or does it mean that he's resolving too many situations with arrest when other options should be available to him or her? Is the officer having trouble writing reports? If an officer goes on a high-stress call where, for instance, mass murder or a woman is brutally tortured, raped, and murdered, should an officer then be able to have some kind of psychological counseling for these high-stress calls? What if an officer's take a sick day every Monday? Does that just mean that he's working hard at another job on Sunday and he's exhausted Monday, or does that mean he's drunk all weekend and he's not sober enough to report to work on Monday? Is an officer missing court? And because he's missing court, criminal cases are having to be dismissed. What's the issue? What issue does that officer have that prevents him from coming to court? Does this officer have more accidents, whether in a police car or accidental discharges of a firearm, etc.? And if so, is that an indication of an employee problem? Early intervention systems try to identify employees with issues or problems, and it's commonly thought that only about 4 to 5% of officers would be considered problem officers or problem employees. And the early intervention system is a voluntary system and non-disciplinary. So certainly if the officer does something wrong, that can go to internal affairs. Internal affairs could discipline or even recommend firing the officer. But what if this officer simply has marriage problems, problems with kids, stress problems, perhaps alcohol problems? Shouldn't there be some avenue where he can get counseling and treatment without losing his job? And so it's commonly believed that early intervention systems should be separate from internal affairs division. Why? Because officers don't trust internal affairs, and because internal affairs is punitive. It will punish the officer for wrongdoing. Early intervention systems are designed to help the officers. With the Houston Police Department, there was a psychological services division, which had, I believe, 2 or 3 full-time psychologists. Houston Police Department when I was there, had about 7,000 total employees and about 5,500 officers. And so they were able to employ 3 full-time psychologists who specifically dealt with police stress issues. And when a person went to the police psychologist at the Psychological Services Division, that was kept confidential from the rest of the department. Some questions to ask are, who's in charge of this EIS? Should it be the department itself? Should it be supervisors? Should it be outside counselors who are not employees of the department, or if they are employees of the department, have a professional responsibility to keep the conversations private or privileged? Is psychological services answerable to the chief of police? If so, what can they be forced to reveal to the chief? And one of the last issues we'll discuss in this chapter on police-minority relations is the issue of racial profiling. Racial profiling has been an issue for years, but really came to a head in 2001. Racial profiling became a dominant issue, and that was based in New Jersey. And they were accused of bias-based policing, or DWBP, driving while black or brown. The New Jersey State Patrol, specifically on the New Jersey Turnpike, was accused of racial profiling. So starting in 2001, a lot of departments did internal studies of racial profiling, and a lot of states started passing laws prohibiting police racial profiling. The Department of Justice did a study in 2007. So keep in mind, in 2007, Obama was still president, and Eric Holder, also a black male, is in charge of the Department of Justice. So in their study, they said, well, all races are equally likely to be stopped. So police are not stopping blacks or Hispanics more than whites. However, when they are stopped, black and Hispanic suspects are more likely to be searched. Well, why do police search people? They frisk them for weapons if they can articulate a fear for their safety. Are black and Hispanic suspects, for instance, more likely to be armed? Or is it just that police, specifically white police officers, but all police officers, are they simply more afraid that black and Hispanic suspects will be armed and therefore more likely to search them? This Department of Justice study also found that police are more likely to use force against black and Hispanic drivers when they're stopped. So is that because black and Hispanic drivers are more likely to be violent and therefore police respond with force? Or does that mean that officers, and all officers really, but in particular white officers, are they more afraid of black and Hispanic drivers based on their race? And does that lead them to use force more often than, say, if it was a white driver? These are hard questions because it's hard to get into the mind of someone as to why someone reacts. It could be even if they did their own soul searching, and we don't know if it's conscious or subconscious bias. After some improvement, most people agree, or at least most people in law enforcement agree, that race issues became worse under President Obama. It was hoped that with the black president, black attorney general, that there would be more trust in the criminal justice system. However, it seems like race issues became worse in that time period. Let's look at specifically at Texas racial profiling laws. This is the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, Article 3.05. Racial profiling is defined as any law enforcement initiated action based on an individual's race, ethnicity, or national origin, rather than on the individual's behavior or an information identifying the individual as having engaged in criminal activity. So first of all, to be racial profiling, it has to be law enforcement initiated. If a person walks up to the police and starts a conversation, that's not law enforcement initiated, therefore it's not racial profiling. Racial profiling has to be based on race, ethnicity, or national origin. Well, by definition, race in racial profiling, rather than on an individual's behavior. So if an individual engages in criminal behavior, regardless of their race, and an officer responds regardless of his race, that is not racial profiling because the officer is responding based on behavior rather than race, ethnicity, or national origin. And the other exception is information identifying the individual as having engaged in criminal activity. So if a woman says to you, "Officer, a Hispanic male stole my purse and he ran that way," and the officer runs that way also looking for a Hispanic male, the fact that he's looking for a Hispanic male is not racial profiling. It's based on information identifying the suspect by the victim. "Officer, a white male stole my car and he drove east." Well, then the officer gets in his car and drives east looking for a white male suspect. That's not racial profiling. That's simply identifying information from the victim. And so if the officer in the first case only looks for Hispanic males, or in the second case only looks for white males, it's still not racial profiling. Racial profiling is specifically prohibited in Texas law, and the law says that each agency must develop a racial profiling policy to prohibit racial profiling by their officers. Also, each agency must collect data from police traffic stops and submit the report to the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. And so many departments have actually printed their tickets now to indicate reason for the stop and to collect data on the race or ethnic origin of the driver. There is an exception, however, if every police vehicle has a camera that records traffic stops, then those reports to the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement don't have to be made. And the idea there is that if every traffic stop is recorded and someone then complains that they were stopped solely because of their race, ethnicity, or national origin, that it would be on video and the officer could show, "Hey, look, here he is weaving, here he is speeding, here he is running a red light, and that's why I stopped him." And because of that, most departments now have gone with dashboard cameras for almost all their patrol vehicles. That's the end of Chapter 6E. Appreciate you joining us, and we'll actually discuss racial profiling in a lot more detail in future class sessions. Thanks for joining us, and have a great day.